In today's show, we're going to talk about how to copy and paste parent and child data in PowerApps. So the idea here is that I've got these expense reports that have got, both the parent data, like what type of expense it was, and then all the line items, and then a bunch of attachments. I want to be able to grab all that data at once, make a copy of it, edit that copy, and then save it off as a new record into my data source. Should be fun. But first, here's our intro. Hi, my name is Shane Young with PowerApps 911, those guys. And today, we're going to copy and edit parent and child data in PowerApps. Sounds crazy, I know. But just think of it as we've got a bunch of data, right? So with relations in it, so relationships between parent and child data, we're going to take that data, we're going to copy it, we're going to make some edits, and then we're going to be able to save that as new records. So we're going to use the example of copying and editing an expense report, but you could think of this as any type of data manipulation where you've got some data and you just want to be able to take it and work from that. And the real fun here is going to be the fact that this app that we're using, I've probably done 10 videos on this app. This app is kind of hodgepodge at this point. So we're going to have to worry about a form, 2 different collections. I've got context variables and global variables. Like when I was practicing the loose word, when I was kind of messing with it earlier, there's a lot of little things here that I had to reverse engineer what the heck I did. So you can kind of get to see me piece my way through that again because, quite frankly, I don't remember what I did. So anyway, let's switch over to my desktop and take a look. Okay, so here's our app. You can see, the idea is you come in here, we're like, no, we do a new expense report. You fill in the information about the parent data, and so this created the parent record. And then we could have one or more line items here, and this was the child data, right? And this was built over a series of videos. I'll put a link to the first part of that series kind of in there. But so you can see, this is how it works. If we go back over here and we were to go to view and edit, you'll see that if I click on November class right here, you can see the idea. So there was a parent data. Here's the child line items. So expense 1 and expense 2, very descriptive. And then some different images that were attached to this, right? So that was the process. So now what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to say, okay, that expense report is the exact same thing I want to work from, right? My next expense report is almost the same thing for the December class. So let's be able to just copy that and pull it over. To build that out, I was like, all right, well, we got to kind of understand really what is being expected by this screen. And so if we look here at this one, we're going to be able to collapse this here and see that the first part over here. So this thing is a big old form. All right. So we're going to need to be able to pop over the description, the date of expense, and type of expense. We're going to send those 3 pieces of information over in a variable, probably. And then this right here, this is a collection, right? So it's in a gallery. It's displaying the collection called expense collection. As you can see, I hadn't went to my standard naming conventions there yet. Ugh, so got to deal with that, but that's all right. So we're going to have to shape a collection that looks like this from the existing SharePoint data. And then down here as well, when we attach a file, we can see that on add file, we are also so we're adding it to the Azure Blob Storage. Doesn't matter where we're adding it, but that's where it got added. And then we're taking what the settings there. So the file name is the name, file link is the link we computed, and the file ID. So those were the 3 pieces that we put together. And then once we did all that, when you hit save over here, this submitted the form. And so then I bet with the form, on success of the form, we can see that for everything in the expense collection, we wrote it over to a list called expense details, title, line item, item cost was line cost, and master ID was bar master ID. And then for all the things in the collection receipts, right, which is where we added when we attached a file, we did the same type of thing. We patched a SQL table. So we have a SharePoint data source, we have a SQL data source, we have an Azure Blob Storage. It doesn't really matter what the data sources were, but I wanted you to see just how hodgepodgey this had become, because you're going to see we have to kind of work through, all right, now I want to copy that. So my first thought around copying it is I'm going to go over to view expenses. And so we know that we want to copy, November class. So if we click on this and hold on the Alt key sign, click on it. So there's the pieces of the puzzle that we want. And so now I'm going to start to kind of assemble them one part at a time. And so probably first I'm going to go up here, insert a icon, and then we'll just do add, and then we'll go over here to the left, or the left, it's right, duh. And then we'll type in copy, and then that'll give us a little copy icon, pull it over here, we'll kind of throw this up here, we'll change its color to white. Good enough, right? You could do this with a button, you just need something on select, and you probably make it look nicer, more fit into the screen, but I just want to add functionality. I don't care what it looks like right now. So, there's three things we're going to need: the parent, the line items, and the files and images. So let's start with the parent. So for the parent, what I'm going to do, that one's pretty straightforward actually. We're going to say set. So create ourselves a global variable called var copied file, or copied item. I don't like file. Var copied item. And then we're just going to set that to our gallery selected. So if we look over here, so then we're going to see that master gallery here is the name of the gallery we want. So we're just going to say master gallery dot selected. And so that would load that record into that variable so we can reference those fields over on the other side. Now, keep in mind that, if I was going to do this in hindsight, I probably would have done this a little bit differently. If I was building this today, instead of having, anything reference master gallery dot selected, I would have said, hey, when you selected this arrow, I would have set a record, set var record to be the selected item. So then I could have used that for all the filtering over here and just had that part as a copy. That's how I do it differently today, but we're working with the confines of kind of the app that I built over the last 4 years. So 3 years, 5 years, I don't know how long it was. So we're going to kind of make it go. But there you go. So that would do that. And then we're just going to, we know the very last step will be navigate back to the new item screen. So now if I click on this, so November class, we'll do this. That should load that into the variable and get us back to here. So how do we make that data show up? Well, now this form over here, if we go back a page to how to get to this form, we're going to see that that form is actually just form 1, and it's just new form. It's just always in new mode. There's no edit expense reports in this app, so I don't have to think too hard about editing. So back over here, I can simply go over here and say, hey, you know what expense description? Your default is actually just going to be var copied dot title, November class. Perfect. Date of expense. Now, if you look at date of expense, it defaults to today, and I wanted to default to today when I'm making a new item, but when I'm copying, I want to make it default to the variable's value. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a function that we don't use a lot called Coalesce. Coalesce takes the first non-blank value. So we're going to say Coalesce var copied item, and then var copied item dot, I think it's date. There you go. And then today. So if the date, or if this variable has the date in it, and it does, it has 11/5, then that's going to show up. If not, it'll go to today. And we need to test that, right? When we get done with this, we need to make sure that we still create a blank new item. This doesn't get messed up. But that's what we want. And then finally, type of expense. Now, I screwed this up in practice. Keep in mind that this, I wasn't sure, but this is actually a combo box. This is not a dropdown. And so if it was a dropdown, I would have set default. Hence what I did. And I was like, why isn't this working? But because it's a combo box, you have to set default selected items. And so instead of parent.default, this is going to be var copied item dot type of something, type of expense. And look at that. That has the value, the record that it matches. So boom. That one variable, those three fields set. Total expense and assigned approver, those are both calculated based on the data in this collection. So when we fix this collection, these two are going to get updated on their own. So I don't have to worry about those right now. Okay, so part 1 done, getting this data correct. Part 2, I believe we'll need to go back over here to view expenses. And so if we look now, actually let's not go back over here, let's go back to where we just were. So if we look at this gallery holds an expense collection. Okay, and so I need to understand how it's structured. So I can either do this, if I highlight it here, it'll show me the structure. And so there's 3 columns: line cost, line item, show save buttons. What I found was easier for me is if I go back to the welcome screen on the new expense screen button, that's where I defined it. So then I just open up my snipping tool and did a new, and I'm going to grab a snip of this, copy. I'm going to throw it on my other monitor, but so that way I can see that, all right, line item is text, line cost is a number, show button. Right? I can see how it's created because we need to recreate this, right? So to do that, we're going to go way back over here to view expenses again. We're going to click on our November class. And so we want these line items to go into that collection. Now, if we look, this is actually pulling straight from expense details. And if we were to look at that, man, I mean, look at that. That is all the SharePoint columns, whatever data source you are. There's a lot of garbage here. So I don't want all of it, but it's kind of the foundation. That's got the idea. So there's probably 3 or 4 different ways I could go with this. The first one I did is probably the most complicated, honestly, but we're going to do it the way I thought of first because it shows you a different way of doing it. But if you come up with a better way, have at it. So I'm going to say I want to clear collect. What was it? It's called expense collection. And so what do we need? Well, we need to build out our structure and then all of that, right? So what goes into structure? So these are going to be the columns. Oh, I don't want that. So this is going to be the data from that gallery. So I could just be like, all right, well, what are you? You are named gallery 2. Let's rename that. That's ridiculous. Gallery line items. Rename our gallery. And so we can go back up here and say, all right, I want you to be gal line items dot all items. Remember, that is that special collection, or sorry, that table data that gets returned of all the things that are being shown currently in the gallery. So there's those 2 items, which are the 2 items we want. So that would get you the 2 items. The problem with gallery line items dot all items, though, is it is all those crazy columns again. And so if you did this, it won't error, but my collection would then have 27 columns that I don't want. And that's extra data to carry around. We never want to do that. So what you can do here is you make, all right, well, really, I just want to use the show columns. So we're going to do a little data manipulation here. And what columns do I want to show? Well, I only need, what, 2, 3 of those? I think 2. So what columns do we need? Well, we need the title column. Title, way down here. And remember, when you're using show columns, it's always in parentheses like that. So we need the title column. And then we need the, it's called like cost. Item cost. And if you can't remember, and how would you, right? Just go down here back to your gallery, item cost. There you go. Right, so I can see this item.item cost is what I want. So we'd go back up here and we'd be like, all right, double quotes, item, and it's not going to auto suggest because it's being rude, item cost. There you go. So now with this, if you do show columns and highlight that, it's going to show you that it's only pulling through the 2 columns, which is what we wanted. Now, we're not perfect, but we're moving in the right direction. Okay, so now the other problem, if you remember from our my little screenshot of snipping tool that I did earlier, what do we need? We need it to be called line item and line cost. So we're going to have to use rename columns to change those names. So outside of show columns, we're going to go into rename columns. And then we'll go outside of the show columns. I'll add my close parentheses, so it's right here, and then do column. And so what columns do I want to rename? Well, I want to rename title. And what do I want to rename it to? What did I just say? Line item. So in double quotes again, just like that. It's happy. We're all happy. And then we want to rename item cost. And what do we want to rename that to? Line cost. Who knows where I made up this stuff, right? But this is very typical. This is the equivalent of having to fix someone else's work. You kind of got to figure out what they did and shape things, massage things to be, different, right? Shane of 4 years ago built this differently than Shane today would build it. So I'm having to kind of think a little bit and wedge it into a pattern that I like. Okay, so we showed columns, renamed columns. Now we have one more problem though. That's 2 columns. But there's a 3rd column here called show save buttons that is hard-coded to true. Okay, so we have to add that column. So now you're going to go here, add columns, and then way down here, right there, do a comma. And so what column do I want to add? I want to add one. You got to get it right? And so that is, I've lost it already over my other screen. Hang on. Show save buttons, trained professionals. Don't try this at home. No, do try this at home. Show save buttons, and I want to set that to true. Actually, I don't. I don't want them edited. I want them to show it false. If it was a new blank item, I would show it to true. All right. That seems kind of right to me. Now, you can see I've got an error, and so what I'm guessing's happened is I haven't closed my clear collect. Yeah, see I've clicked on this parenthesis here, and it shows me that's the add column one. So I didn't close this clear collect one, so that's what it's waiting on. So I'll add one more close parenthesis right there. All right, so now if we hit play, now we should get this and this. Let's did it. Boom. Ta-da! And so show columns, right, we're not going to the logic, but yeah, show save buttons that we were just talking about, that controls whether or not this edit pencil is shown or not. And so I wanted them to be edited, not into open mode. So that's why I changed that to false. So that was just a function of how this particular screen worked. But there you go. Now you notice that right away, I don't have a way to add a new item. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over here. Remember our code? New expenses. And so this line added a new one, a new blank row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. We're going to go back over here to view expenses, go back to our button right here. And so after we create the collection with the items we want, Shift Enter, we're going to paste this in, but I don't want to do a clear collect this time. I just want to add a row. So you use collect to add a row. So collect expense collection, line item, blank, line cost 0, show save buttons true. I do want to show the save buttons for this one. Close that, do that, and do that. So that right there should get us what we want, I hope. I don't know, let's hit play. Let's click on November class again. Let's click on this. Look at that. So now we're here. We got the data set here. We got the records that we already pulled in. And then, or the rows, not records. Well, there are records. Rows, records, same word, whatever. And we have the blank one sitting here ready to go so that we could add a, expense 3 for $33, and we'd say save. And now we're off and functioning the way that we would want. Okay. I'm happy with this. I'm kind of satisfied with what's going on. So now what we need to do is we need to get the files pulled over. So we're going to do almost the same exact thing, right? It's easier though, because there's less pieces over there. So let's go back over to there. So we'll go here, we'll go back to view expenses. And so we need to figure out how that one is structured. So we'll go back to this screen again. Oh, and I don't think this one does it. So if we do a new expense, now if we do a new expense, look, these are still filled in. Why? Because if you look at new expense right here, it resets the form, puts in a new mode, and it sets the collections back to blank, but it does not set that variable. Remember, var copied has all the data in it. So what are we going to do? We're going to say set var copied item and use the blank function to make it a blank variable. So now if we press the button, now if we go over here, these two are blank and this one is defaulting back to today. Yeah, January 3rd, yay, 2022. So those pieces are all together. The last piece of the puzzle here, not the last piece, but one of the last pieces, is if we go look at our attach process, we're going to see that on add file, what are we doing? We're creating a collection called col receipts, first name, or FN, FL, and FID. So I will never remember all that. So I'm going to do a new, I'm going to grab my snipping tool again, and then I'll just throw this on the other monitor, make my life easier. But so I do this a lot when you're not watching even, but whatever. So that's the collection we need to get to. So back over here, view expenses. And so if we click on November class down here, we are seeing that we're filtering out this data. And that's gal file images, okay? So very similar to last time. We're going to go back up here. Did not mean to do that. Let's go PowerApps, you're being rude. So what we're going to do, we're going to say clear collect again. And then we're going to say, what was that called? Collect receipts. Told you I did not do a good job. Former Shane, bad job at naming things. Collect receipts. And so what do we need here? Well, we know that we want to pull in, let's close that and do that. We know that we want to pull in the gallery, gal files.all items. Once again, our columns aren't right? So Azure file ID, file link, file name, ID, icon 3, a bunch of garbage, yikes. So step 1, show columns. What columns do I want to show? Well, I want to show Azure file ID. Notice this time auto-suggest is working because why wouldn't it? File name, and then file, Look at that. I brag on it and then it stops. Oh, and then it comes back. Oh, so annoying. Okay, so that gets us the 3 columns shown. And then what else we need to do? We need to rename those columns because we know those were not the columns that I used. And I purposely make my collection column names and data source names similar but different to avoid confusion when I'm referencing them. So what are we going to do? I'm going to say I want to rename Azure File ID. Azure File ID. And what I want to rename that? Well, looking at my screenshot, it was FID. Make sure you get it exactly right. And then I want to rename, or I want to do file name here. So file name. And we want to rename that to FN. And then file link and FL. There we go. Okay. So then that would get those guys in there in a shape that should be correct. Now this one doesn't need to add columns because it doesn't have that extra column for maintaining state. So should be able to grab those 3, hit the copy. This data is correct. This data is correct. This data is correct. Yay! So I think all that's left to do is to say, all right, let's say expense 3. That is misspelled. I don't care. 303. And then we will say save over here. Boom, 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 boom. All right. And then we'll just go up here and change this from November class to December class. Date of expense though was, we'll just change that to December 6th. Sure, why not? Remember way back in December? And then we'll just change the type to wasteful. Looks good, looks good. All right. And then let's just say save. Cross our fingers. All right. And now if we say view and edit expenses, December class, and if we click on it, look at that. There's our misspelled expense 3. And there is, I meant to add another file. I promise if you had added another file, it works. So all of that would have been the same. Very, very, very interesting. And if we go back to new expense, that is blank, that is blank. Yeah. I think that's all the pieces of the puzzle. Okay, so things for you to think about. One of the things I would note here is like for the file attachments that I am just linking to the previous attachment. I didn't like recopy those. If you wanted to, you would have had to like go fetch those and loop through. So depending on where you were storing them, that would be different. But so if you had file attachments, you'd have to think through, do you just want to reference the old ones or do you need to, recreate those? Or maybe, receipts and stuff. In this particular example, I shouldn't even brought those over because, it doesn't make any sense to have duplicate receipts because I need new receipts for a new expense report, right? I don't want people duplicating those. I don't know, but that's a piece of the puzzle that I think you need to think through a little bit over there. There's a lot here, right? I've used this technique in a lot of different customer apps for different scenarios, and it's never the same every time, right? So it's really just about kind of thinking through getting the data back into the shape you need, back on the screens you want. Sometimes you might have had to go back and say, oh, you know what? I have an edit experience and I want to put it through the edit experience. You could do that. There's also a much simpler version of this one. If this one's like melting your brain, you're like, oh my God, what just happened? I'll put a link up above to the simpler version of this I did that didn't have the parent-child relationships because they are a lot of the complexity that we were kind of seeing here. So, but anyway, that's what I've got for today. Questions, comments, leave them below. I'm always happy to check those out. Or if you just want to get some training, got some upcoming in-person training classes over at training.poweraapps911.com. So you can do an in-person class with me. We can teach this together. It'd be awesome. Yeah. And I guess with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day. Hey, me again. Before you go, click on the subscribe button, right? Join the list of 100,000 plus people that have subscribed already. Or if you need any help, right? Check us out at PowerApps 911. We do big projects, little projects. We do training. We do everything, and we can help you. Or if you want to see more videos, you probably do, then just click on the playlist above. Cool? Thanks, and have a great day.